right, we'll call the meeting to order. Do we have any public comments?
Sorry, Seth was up there.
All right, next order is to approve the minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, minutes are approved. Annual election of the Audit Committee Chairman and Vice Chairman. Do I hear nominations?
Is our current chair going to continue and get nominated?
I nominate Tom Bates to continue in the role.
Second.
All in favor?
And I nominate Courtney Johnson to continue to serve in her role as vice chair.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
That was so easy.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon.
You're welcome.
New business. The Crossland guys, are you guys ready to make your presentation?
Bill's helping us out there. No, you're good.
Here, I got two.
Thank you.
Take one down. Pass it on.
Right, I believe first on the agenda is the single audit report. It's the one in the blue cover. So this is the schedule of expenditures of federal and state awards, and our reports required by the Single Audit Act under the Uniform Guidance. So in this report, we have two different independent auditors' reports. The first is our report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance and other matters based on an audit performed in accordance with government auditing standards. And then the second report is our report on compliance for each major program and internal control over compliance, as well as a report on the schedule of expenditures of federal and state awards. Both of those reports were unmodified, and there were no findings reported in either of those. If you flip ahead to the middle, page 20, you can see total federal expenditures for fiscal year 24. It was 478, almost 479 million. And then a couple pages past that, on page 23, you can see total state expenditures was about 103 million. And then probably the best thing for you to look at in this is on page 28. It's the summary of our independent auditor's results. And it gives you a breakdown on the types of reports that we issued. It shows you that they were unmodified, that we had no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, no non-compliance that were reported. It also tells you what the major programs were that we audited, which for fiscal year 24 was the special education cluster. That's the IDEA grants, as well as the Title II-A, the magnet schools assistance, and then the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. Metro was a low-risk auditee again for fiscal year 24. That means that if you're a high-risk auditee, we would be required to get coverage of 40% of your expenditures. Since you're just a low risk, you get 20% coverage. And then the next page, you can see we had no findings reported for fiscal year 24, and the finding that was reported for fiscal year 23 is being reported as corrected. Any questions?
Do we have questions? Thank you.
do you need to make any motions before I move on to the management other, or do you want
You
to
can
wait
do
till
one now, or you can do two at the end of the second presentation, it's up to y'all.
We'll just go ahead and, motion to approve.
Second. Accept.
Accept, sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Report is accepted.
All right, and then the next document that we have to cover is our letter of recommendations to management for the fiscal year 24 audit. Again, as mentioned previously, we did not have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies to report. We did have two other comment matters, just areas for operational improvement. The first is timely preparation of bank reconciliations, which you may have noticed was a finding last year as well, just to follow up on that. Essentially, there is room for improvement, but they have improved from the previous year. It's essentially the gist of that. And I know finance is taking steps to implement automatic reconciliations to help speed up that process as well. And then the second observation relates
Hang on
to,
just a second.
Hang on just a second. So I appreciate that you're letting us know when these specific accounts were, the reconciliation was completed. Do we have, is there some sort of requirement for, should it be within 60 days? Like, is there a rule?
I believe Metro's policies, they say 45 days.
Okay.
Correct.
And so, but you're implementing something to reconcile almost immediately?
So there are some mitigating processes in place where disbursements are reconciled. Everything that can be reconciled automatically is reconciled within the system automatically. And then there's a flag or a report that is produced to say these items we could not automatically reconcile. So the staff actually has to take time to go in and look at every single one that doesn't reconcile automatically. We have a lot of policies in place about how departments are to enter their cash into the system and how they're supposed to enter it timely. And we are working with our departments to improve the administration of those policies so that we can better do a bank rec in a timely fashion.
So the reason that
That's
something, I'm just assuming, just correct me if I'm wrong, so the reason, the most common reason that something couldn't be reconciled is just because information has not been uploaded from the different departments?
Sometimes it's a delay in terms of entering the cash receipt into the system, and then sometimes the delay is that when they enter it, it isn't an exact match to what hit the bank account. So they have to reconcile some of those differences, and then sometimes it could even be the day. So if they entered it on, the bank hit on 3/15, but they entered it on 3/16, then it won't auto-rec either, and then they have to look at that. So sometimes they're the exact same amount, but it's a day difference on when it hit the bank.
Is there a way to
That makes
correct that
sense.
in the software to give you, because I know, like, if I write in my check register that, hey, I made a deposit of $1,000 or whatever today, but it probably won't reflect until tomorrow on the bank, so that's a difference in a day. Is there a way to update the system to say, within a 2-day period, if the date is off by 2 days, it's a whole nother thing if it's several days, but to just
We are working with our IT partners to try and implement some of those solutions that you're suggesting. So,
does anybody remember the amount of money
do you wanna add anything? Okay.
that we're talking about unreconciled, I can't talk today, for up to 152 days? Like what amount of money are we talking about?
I do not have that information off the top of my head.
Could you ballpark it for me? I'm just concerned about if you've got cash receipts and we're not reporting it for 5 months, 4 months, 5 months, like where is this cash
Well,
going?
and to Janine's point, it's not that it's not necessarily not recorded, it's just that it didn't auto-reconcile. And it could be off by a penny and not auto-reconcile, and that just takes them longer to match up the transactions.
Okay.
So just for clarification on that, it's not the transactions are being recorded, well, let me ask the question, I guess. Are the transactions being recorded timely?
Yes, from as
So
far as we can
it's-
tell
it's
from the
only the
other testing, the receipt
reconciliation.
disbursement testing that we do, yes. It's just a matter of reconciling those transactions to the bank statements.
Okay. Fine.
Okay.
And then the second comment relates to property tax receipts. Several of the selections that we tested were included in a single batch receipt, which is common when the payments are being made by a mortgage company, which I believe was the case in this item. In tying that out to the bank and to eGov, which is where property tax billings are done, there were 2 receipts included in that batch that were not recorded in eGov. After we brought it up at the trustee's office, they posted those to the accounts, corrected the any accrued interest that had been recorded, and resolved what was in eGov. And our recommendation was for them to, reconcile eGov to the amounts in the bank on a monthly basis.
What, so, describe that a little bit more for me. You tested 60 accounts and 2 of them were not reported to the property owner's account.
Yes, they weren't reflected on the property owner's statement in eGov.
But out of how many that you looked at, 60?
We looked at 60 in that batch receipt itself. It was like thousands of receipts.
But nearly half of what you selected was messed up.
No, just of the 60 that we tested, 27 were within that one batch. And there were 2 individual items from that one batch, which would have been, thousands of individual property receipts that did not get reflected in eGov. So the amount in the bank was correct, the amount in the general ledger was correct. It's just that those 2 individual accounts, like I said, out of thousands in the batch, did not get reflected in the property taxpayers' accounts.
I see, okay. So rather than a 2 out of 60 problem, it's a 2 out of thousands and thousands problem. Okay,
Okay.
that's what.
What's throwing me off is the 27 out of 60 selections where it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
we got a serious problem.
And to be honest, the 2 weren't even included in our selections. It's when we were testing those 27 and testing the payment against what's in the GL and the bank, we identified that it did not match the total batch payment per eGov.
Okay.
And later determined it was those 2 individual receipts that were reflected.
Okay. Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Letter of recommendation to management is accepted. Thank you guys for your work. Much appreciated.
Great job.
Laura, I
Do we
think
need
you're
to
up
make room
next.
for somebody else, or can we stay for this next
For
report?
this one, you can stay because we don't have anybody coming for this one, but after that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one on the agenda is the investigation into allegations at Nashville General Hospital. This one was issued back at the end of February as well as presented to the Nashville Hospital, or the Hospital Authority Board at the same time. Basically, we had been receiving allegations about Nashville General Hospital since about April of last year. With all the stuff going on in our office, we had a very big audit at that point in time. We would work on it as we could, and then we accumulated allegations as they came in. Once we hired our lead investigator is when we really started looking into many of these. I'll start by saying this was an investigation and not an audit. There's a very big difference between those. In investigations, allegations are what scope our work. So we do not look outside of those allegations. We don't expand our scope. We may make notes of risks in other areas, but since it's not an audit, we don't look outside of the allegations. We stay very specific to them. When we had our lead investigator come on, which I guess he could come in, but he, when he started looking into these allegations and trying to go through the ones that we had and seeing which ones were specific enough for us to actually investigate, which ones were kind of relevant to the time period and had not been so long past that we couldn't really do much about them. And then which ones kind of putting in an audit bucket, as well as some that maybe when we have more time that we would look into them based on materiality. What we came up with was 5 allegations. And I'm going to go through each allegation and kind of what we did and if they are substantiated or unsubstantiated, because in investigations that's what we do, we substantiate or unsubstantiate. The first allegation relates to an executive level leadership person who was alleged to have had Nashville General Hospital credit card pay for tuition and then seek reimbursement for it. This allegation was one where Nashville General Hospital has a policy where you can take certain courses, and after you've completed them and passed them, and based on your grade, you get reimbursement for that tuition. They have a policy in place. They have a packet and forms that they put together for each of them. So what we did was we went and we pulled all of the packets for the tuition for this one person. We pulled Nashville General Hospital's credit card statements. They have 3 credit cards over there. We looked at all of them to see if they ever paid for tuition, as well as tracing it to the actual payments made back to this person for reimbursement. What we found was that each tuition request had the packet along with it. One specifically, the reimbursement was actually for less than it was supposed to be. So what happened was the Nashville General Hospital, the CEO said, we will pay for your next one on the credit card instead of reimbursing you, since we haven't fully reimbursed you for the last one. That executive level team member never sought reimbursement for the one that was on the credit card. So for this allegation, it was unsubstantiated. That double dipping did not happen. Our next allegation related to City Valet and a contract in place, and the allegation that City Valet was overbilling Nashville General Hospital. So Nashville General Hospital entered into a contract with City Valet to provide 5 valet individuals for 11 hours a day. They would pay them a month in advance and for specified rates within the contract. Those valet team members would log their time into the Kronos timekeeping system, just like Nashville General Hospital employees do, and they would be billed, and then a reconciliation would occur, and the next month there would be a credit or some true up for the actual hours worked. We pulled all of the invoices, we pulled all of the timesheets, and summarized them and compared them, and we did find that this one was substantiated. There was about a 2,700 hour discrepancy, as well as that accumulated about to $232,000 that was overbilled to Nashville General Hospital for that contract, and all those payments were made. There was never any credits back to Nashville General Hospital. So that allegation was substantiated. Our next allegation was a specific list of contracts that were alleged to not have appropriately gotten board approval before being executed. For this one, there's a Nashville General Hospital policy for what contracts have to go to the board. It can be based on clinical or non-clinical, the length of time that the contract is going to be active, the amount, and other parameters that are in place. So we looked at that policy, and then we pulled all these contracts, looked at the contracts, looked at how much had been billed to each contract, and then combed through the minutes of all the board meetings to see if they went before the board. What we ended up finding was that 16 non-clinical contracts within that allegation did not go to the board as appropriate as they were supposed to, and 6 clinical contracts that were supposed to go to the board did not go before the board. So that allegation was substantiated. Our next allegation was that a Dr. Kevin Billups was utilizing Nashville General Hospital. Oh, wait, one thing about those contracts before the board. Part of that allegation was that was at the direction of Dr. Webb. That is part of the allegation we could not substantiate. We could not determine the reason that these contracts did not go to the board. We found nothing that's pointed to anyone stopping them from going to the board, anything that made them not go. The contracting policy or procedures were not the greatest, and so we can't tell why. So that part
So it could have been in his direction, you just couldn't prove that.
That's correct.
Okay.
So next allegation. Our next allegation was that Dr. Kevin Billups was utilizing Nashville General Hospital clinic space, as well as scheduling, supplies, equipment, and staff without a contract in place. What we looked at for this was we looked up his profile online. He's a Meharry physician. We called the scheduling to see if Nashville General Hospital was scheduling his patients, and they were. We looked at the facilities that he was using, which were Nashville General Hospital owned facilities, performed interviews. Dr. Webb noted that He believed that this doctor would be included in the Meharry Professional Services Agreement that was in place. For that to happen, you have to be seeing Nashville General Hospital patients, and what then happens is Meharry then bills you back for seeing those patients. Dr. Billups never showed up on any of those billings, so he was never seeing any patients of Nashville General Hospital while utilizing these facilities and all of the equipment and people and supplies that go along with it. So for this one, it was substantiated as well. The last one had to do with 3 specific public records requests. They all happen to be media requests for contracts. The allegation being that these contracts were altered before they were sent to the media. So for this one, we got the media requests to see what contracts were requested. We had contracts management at General Hospital pull all of the relevant contracts that they had on file. We got all of the materials that were sent to the requester for the public records request. And we got some internal emails between different parties within Nashville General Hospital on trying to get the contracts together. What we found were a few different things. We found that, for one, there were contracts provided to the media that Nashville General Hospital's contract management didn't even have on file. We found contracts that were on file at Nashville General Hospital that were not appropriately given to the media, so they were not provided to the media. And then we also found contracts where the one that's on file at Nashville General Hospital did not have the vendor or the counterparty's signature, but what was provided to the media was signed, indicating that there was a change or there was alteration before it was submitted to the media. So this was one that we also substantiated. So those allegations, we had 4 that were substantiated, 1 that was unsubstantiated. With investigations, we make recommendations if we see things that are that can keep bad things from happening. We're going to make the recommendation. Unlike an audit, the management does not get an opportunity to accept the risk or have any input necessarily on the recommendations. We just expect them to be implemented. So we had 12 recommendations with this that all applied basically to the allegations and how to stop them, putting certain controls in place to ensure. Our understanding is that they've already started implementing many of these. The board has also taken some steps to keep some things as far as canceling contracts. We have a meeting with the new CEO, the interim CEO, at the end of the week to get a better understanding of the steps they're taking, that they've already taken, and what they're also going to do to fix other issues related to this investigation. So with that, if y'all have any questions, I am here, as well as Paul Goganellis, who is our lead investigator. Yes.
I have a lot.
Can I say something before you start?
Yeah, sure.
So just in way of being transparent, my employer, Vanderbilt Medical Center, has a lot of agreements with National General. And I'm sometimes called upon to kind of, work with some of those issues in those agreements. I don't have a conflict. None of them are implicated here in this report. But I did want to just declare that and say I don't feel like it affects, my input here, but I'll be transparent about that.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, Courtney.
Thank you. So I want to go back to the city of LA because I'm going to go one by one. So just so everyone knows, anybody that's watching this at home, the reason why this is so important is because the Metro Nashville taxpayer subsidizes Metro General by a lot every single year. We started off the year with $62 million of a subsidy. We just last week authorized another $10 million to get them through to June 30th, with another $860,000 going to Dr. Webb for deferred compensation that was agreed upon, which makes my stomach hurt, and I've made that very clear on the floor. As far as, so we're looking at a differential here of $231,000, almost $232,000 that was overbilled and subsequently overpaid to City of LA. My question, it's my understanding that this contract has now been canceled. Okay, and then as far as recouping these overpaid taxpayer dollars, have we had any discussion about that?
We have not. That is something that would be discussed at our meeting on Friday with the new interim CEO.
Okay. And so it's also wanting to put into the record how important contracts are, because this was billed exactly the way the contract was drafted. So it was a terribly written contract. To have a fixed amount of hours paid, prepaid, and then just to constantly bill that, regardless, you're supposed to reconcile, which the reconciliation didn't happen. I guess that's where we were in breach, or they were in breach. But that reconciliation never happened. Now we're in a situation where they basically owe us $232,000 that I can guarantee you they cannot come up with, and will likely declare bankruptcy if we seek to recoup those funds. Contract writing is incredibly important. So I've already asked who approved the contract, who drafted the contract, and how this came to be, because it was just irresponsibly written. And we're not talking about Metro General's dollars. We're talking about Davidson County taxpayer dollars. So I'll look forward to those answers that I know you can't answer right now. Going on to these unapproved contracts.
Chair,
Yes.
may, Ms. Johnson, may I then ask a question about
Yeah.
the city valet?
Sure.
Please just would stay
Yeah.
topically on that one in particular. I guess my question is somewhat of a follow-on when we are contracted with someone, right? And so, yes, we have a certain duty as far as internal controls and reconciling, but when people are billing us in a way that is not accurate to time worked, you know, I've engaged this from a policy perspective before when, like, okay, we had an internal duty to make sure that people weren't, you know, billing hours at executive rate for certain inspection services and so forth. And so I think I want to understand, as it relates to the recommendations, there's sort of now, and then there's going forward, and kind of awkward default presumption that we might ever work with this vendor again. Mm-hmm. And so I think we work from a policy perspective to kind of see if in future selection processes a substantiated finding and an audit or an investigation was basically a ding against you if you were going to work with Metro government again. And I think that was a little bit kind of challenging to navigate that, because often our selection process relied so much on, you've worked with Metro before, right? And then that was like some huge scoring boost. And so,
Can I interrupt though?
Yes,
Because
yeah.
it's just because I'm not so sure who failed.
right.
Because they were billing exactly the way they were told to bill, which was the 55 hours per week or whatever it was, right? It was a set amount. What was failing to happen was the reconciliation.
Yeah.
So both parties probably failed, because someone at the hospital should have said, wait a minute, we didn't reconcile last month's.
Right.
By the same token, city valet didn't, maybe they didn't turn in those or they obviously did turn in their reconciled hours, right? Because you got them.
No, their valets were clocking in and out using the same system as Nashville General Hospital's employees. So we pulled those from Nashville General Hospital's, it's Kronos, right?
Yes.
From Kronos. So that's how we found that part.
So who was supposed to be performing the reconciliation?
It was city valet who was supposed to by contract.
Okay, so city valet.
Yes.
But also someone from general should have said,
That's
hello?
the checks, right? Like, they have a duty, we have a duty, and
Yeah.
so to your point about kind of going forward, internal controls and that process, I also want to make sure that, you know, there is, you know, if you contract with Metro and you don't, like, I struggle a little bit, because I feel like sometimes that doesn't really come to bear in the future, right? And you get a little bit of like, well, why are we working with people who, you
From
know,
a
have-
procurement perspective.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I don't know the path to acquire this contract if it went through procurement.
Probably not, because they're.
General Hospital does their own procurement. And then they have their own legal person, but also, I don't know how much Metro Legal works with them to review contracts.
We review them if it's not the standard goods and services contract, or if the vendor has any edits to our standard documents, then procurement sends them to the designated attorney at Metro Legal who works with that department.
Yeah, well, and I think too, that's that's kind of this perennial challenge in Metro, like kind of best practices, finance, procurement, but here's this big department and they do procurement this way. Best practices in HR, but here's this big department and they do HR stuff differently, right? And kind of getting those things in alignment, I think is really important.
I will say that Metro Legal advises the board, but I'm pretty sure that Metro General is supposed to, but I'm not sure that they do, since Mark Overlog left, have their own counsel. Or not should, but used to have their own counsel named Mark Overlog, but I don't know if he's been replaced, but we do have someone in our office who advises the board.
But as far as like procurement and contract management and things like that, the hospital authority has quite a bit of authority to do things that other maybe boards and commissions don't necessarily have. My problem with that is that they are so heavily subsidized. And so they're not playing with their own money. If you're playing with your own money, I really don't necessarily have skin in the game or an opinion. But when you're playing with lots and lots of taxpayer dollars, that's when I care, and I'm not so sure that they should have the latitude that they have to play with those kinds of dollars and contracts and have their own procurement and be able to approve and do things like this. Because at the end of the day, who loses? The taxpayer loses. These are dollars that we will not get back. And we just added another $10 million. I mean, I'm gonna add up a lot of this. I mean, we're getting close. That's a chunk of that $10 million that they're asking for to get through to the beginning of the new fiscal year, which begins July the 1st, right? And so there's just no checks and balances because of the amount of authority that this particular authority has and their own rules that they play by. There's the last contract or one of these. Anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess just from a governance structure in the meeting that you were having, right, I presume there is best practice in hospital board governance and procurement and contracting and so forth. And so, the authority can't know about contracts that nobody made them aware of, but,
Well, they knew about this one though.
Well, right, I guess I'm speaking, and I apologize.
On the next one.
On the next one, whether signed, backdated, effectuated, or accepted by the board. So again, I mean, that's an internal control, but I think, something that I've thought is maybe kind of inherently challenging as far as the support to the authority relative to their oversight of Dr. Webb's role is kind of who serves in the secretarial capacity for the board. And so having the executive assistant to the director for whom the board has oversight seems like a conflict. That's not to say that person did anything untoward, but it just inherently puts that person in a very awkward position, right? Was it incumbent on that individual to make sure, between the board and whatever, that Dr. Webb signed the thing that was brought back, what is whose responsibility? And when that lacks clarity, that's just all kinds of a hot mess, so, okay. Thank you.
One point of clarification on something you said. You said it was the duty of the valet company to do the reconciliation. Is that by the contract that they were charged with that? What was Nashville General's responsibility to provide them with the information, since the record keeping on the hours were in their system?
It should have been a joint effort. So it does play into both, needing to do their part and back each other up and work together on the reconciliation process.
So the initial point of failure, if to do a reconciliation, you need the data in order to do that, and the data was never provided. Or right.
It's incumbent on them to ask for it.
Yes.
Right.
Well, but they're the ones writing checks that are too big, and they should know that. Like, to me, it's general. General should have said, hey, here's your hours, you're supposed to do this reconciliation or whatever, we don't want to continue to pay, these exorbitant amounts. I mean, I get it, but to me, the failure is more probably on general than it is on, they're both at fault, but the initial point is, if I'm the one holding the data that is needed in order to do this reconciliation, that it's kind of incumbent upon me to share that with them, especially when I stand to gain from that from a monetary perspective. moving on to allegation C. So of these contracts, do we have a dollar amount associated with these contracts that were unapproved? Basically, dollars unapproved went out?
If you turn to page 8
Oh.
of this one, table
Oh,
three.
that's right, 4.6, basically $1 million. Okay. Have these contracts been canceled?
That I don't know. I don't think so. That's something we've got to clarify. I don't know that they need, I mean, as far as understanding what the contracts are for and stuff like that, whether or not the board wants to continue with them, I'm not sure. That may be an evaluation process that they have to go through.
Yeah.
At least go back before the board.
Yes.
Yeah,
Should at
I mean,
least go
all
back.
of these need to get approval, but I would also say, and some of these are probably gonna say, yeah, we probably would have approved these. Like, not all of it is gonna be, you know, but of the ones that the board would say, we wouldn't have approved this, is there any way to get that money back?
That I don't know. That's a conversation that we have not been involved in, so I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, just in these two allegations, we're talking about almost $5 million, which is almost half of what we just gave them last week.
Do you, on the healthcare consulting team and healthcare transformation contracts, those in particular seem like contracts that would directly implicate decisions that the board was making around hospital development, you know, what the future holds, you know, all those kinds of things. Did you all look at the minutes of the meetings to see if that group, whoever that is, had ever reported to the board on what they were looking at for?
I was gonna say no, since the allegation was just about the contract
approval of the
approval, we
contract.
have to stick to the allegation.
Okay.
But I will say I didn't notice their names mentioned in any agenda at all, meaning, you know, conversations, period, with that company.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And we don't know what, I think you just maybe asked that, the healthcare consulting team and healthcare transformation, which accounts for $2.2+ million, we don't know what they were doing. We have no idea. That's for a period of how long?
So this is how much was paid to them between 2022 and 2024.
So 2 years. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question? Do we know, just from your investigatory, at what point, because, you know, that was implicated as far as the look back for Dr. Webb or the approval of retirement savings, right, and kind of getting into the minutes and the notes and talking to people who are at what point were those meetings starting to be recorded versus you're looking at minutes versus I'm looking at a live tape of the meeting to see if things, do we know that sort of date certain definitive line between, yeah, I think that would be, I mean, that's something from our perspective as council members, and we can see have legal implications, process implications. There is a little bit of a tension there. I think when I first came onto council and see our Parks Board friends, you know, like Parks Board's meetings weren't recorded, right? And there were matters of contention. So I think from a budgetary standpoint for council members and the administration, we have a lot of boards and commissions, but we can see not having appropriate minutes or having the actual recording, those can have cost implications that probably exceed what it would have cost this government to tape those board meetings, right? And so it's always interesting to me to see when, like, you know, but for, or if we'd had the recording, would we have known different things or had more nuance that didn't necessarily get effectuated into minutes, you know, so.
And minutes can be wrong, and they're wrong often.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
you know, when we're talking about the thing for 860, right, like those were minutes, that was not a recorded. And so,
Right.
you know, and it was also 5 years ago, so people are
Yeah.
saying, oh yeah, that's what we intended, but did you? You know, and was there a reason why Kevin Crumbo or Bob Cooper, whoever it was, did not, the finance director at the time, did not put the money in because was he told to? You know, if he wasn't told to, was it really effectuated in that meeting, truthfully? Or was the minute, so, yeah, to your point, I'm glad we're now recording those things. Okay, allegation D. So, Dr. Billups, so, it's probably in here and I'm just missing it. How long has this been going on? Has he been using the hospital basically as his private
Since 2023, I believe.
since 2023? And so since it was substantiated, where he's using clinic space, supplies, equipment, and support staff free of charge, are we, I mean, I feel like this needs to be retroactively billed.
We did not quantify it, I mean, you can see in there, we didn't quantify it, but
I was going to say, previously, he was using the space at the hospital. When the new Bordeaux location opened up, that's when he was given space and staff and schedulers and equipment at that location. My understanding was there was a period when he was actually at the hospital and then moved over to the new
In this,
Bordeaux
in the
clinic.
2023 to now
Whenever the
period?
clinic opened, I believe it was October of '24.
Well, so that's even easier. If he's out there, I mean, that's easier to quantify, because any expenses that are associated with that location should be billed to him, right? Okay. Is that something we can do, Janine?
We can certainly, I've been pretty quiet, but we are working with
Forensic,
we are working with the hospital staff, the interim CFO, Kimberly Blackledge, as well as Veronica Elders, who is the acting manager at the hospital. We've been having weekly meetings with them to work on addressing all of these issues, recommendations. They are going through contracts, reviewing the contracts that are there, and working through really every single one of these substantiated allegations. So we have been working hand in hand with them on some of the cleanup processes, and are working to address all of those. So it's.
are we also working on possibly recouping any of these funds?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Are they cooperative in this, or is there some
Are they
resistance?
cooperating?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I will say that also includes the chair of the finance committee, Christy Smith, is also a part of those conversations. So, and I've also had conversations with Dr. Martin as well, who is chair of their board. So I've been in regular contact with all of those individuals since this report came out. And Kevin Brown, Deputy Finance Director, has been a part of those conversations. So we are monitoring, working with them to address that. It is a good relationship, and we feel like we have great cooperation right now. And they are as interested in getting this cleaned up and set on the right path as we are. So I can tell you that's where we are today. It doesn't change this report, it doesn't change the findings in the report, but we are working to address these.
And I will say, I'm being decently aggressive. I understand that in 2020, 2022, 2023, we had different leadership there. The authority was made up of different people, and so I acknowledge that. But yeah.
Is there also someone, I mean, there's financial implications for allegation D. There's also some legal implications.
100%.
Is there somebody from Metro Legal or elsewhere looking into this business practice?
I think as I explained, I don't know that Mark Overlock has, to my knowledge, Mark Overlock, who was the attorney for the hospital and not the board, has not been replaced. Now, whether Nashville General Hospital has a contract with another attorney to provide advice, I'm not aware of, because we don't represent them.
But
But the board does. And that presents an interesting question in terms of who would, and I don't know, who has standing to sue to recoup some of these funds for the hospital. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I guess even past the recoupment of the funds, I'm less, I mean, I'm concerned about that, but this is taxpayer, but beyond that, it doesn't seem like there's anybody actually in charge of reviewing these arrangements. Like, this arrangement is not okay, and I don't know who is following up on that.
So I think when Lauren has the opportunity to sit down on Friday with the hospital staff, they have been working on an action plan to to address all of the recommendations in the investigation. And my understanding from talking to Veronica and Dr. Blackledge is that they have gone through and scrubbed and tried to make sure that every physician that is in the building working has a contract in place. So they are really trying to plow through all of the data and the people and looking at the contracts. It takes a while to do all of that, but they are trying to address that. As far as the legal ramifications of that, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you think about liability and those types of things, and it definitely is cause for concern.
My understanding is that Metro employs the nurses, is that correct? But there's the PSA that isn't in place for the physicians. This is all outside of
And the-
our bailiwick,
And
but
the PSA, they're working towards getting that finalized.
That's a professional services agreement,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, thank you so much, Vice Mayor. But yes, they're working to bring that to a close and get something in place as well.
For doctors that are treating Metro General Hospital patients, not their own private patients.
Correct. Correct.
Is this arrangement still going on?
No, our understanding is that it ceased. And that he is no longer practicing in a Nashville General Hospital building.
Okay, or moving on. So, allegation E. Community health marketing has been paid quite a bit of money over the past 5 or 6 years. And it says, so there were 4 of the 6 contracts were executed. Do we know what these, because it's the same company, to have 6 different contracts for 6 different things, what are these contracts related to? If it's a marketing, I mean, how many ways do you market something?
Each contract had very specific scope of work, and they're very detailed. But they all were laid out as to what would occur, in each of those contracts.
And the dollar amount associated with all 6 of those sets of responsibilities?
And may I ask a follow-up question, Chair, Mr. Robinson? So might that include lobbying, marketing to the general public, marketing to an internal audience? I think I've always had a fair amount of concern that we were using taxpayer dollars to pay someone to lobby the council about the hospital. Like, that always just seemed on its face grossly inappropriate. So I don't know, is that among the contracts for this entity? I don't want to presume that, okay.
I believe so.
Right, so basically they were kind of parsing the lobbying piece, the external marketing piece, and so forth.
And did we verify that all of these responsibilities that were laid out within these, or among these 6 contracts were actually performed?
No, that would have been outside the scope of the allegation.
So we just know that the contract exists, not that necessarily the contracts were,
Because this one was just about what was provided to the public records request.
but we do know that the checks were cashed.
I mean, did you make sure?
I know that the checks were cashed.
I was about to say, we didn't check that.
So, this is, it's so much money that it's worth, I think, looking into, of like, what did we get out of those 6 contracts and $3.4 million over the last 5 years? Because that's the amount. It's a lot. And these are all, they're all canceled as of right now? Or is there any did any of those contracts continue after this came out?
That I'm not sure about. We haven't verified it with, we've seen reports that most of these were canceled, however, or all of them, but we have not verified that with General Hospital yet.
I don't know off the top of my head. Kevin, do you know by chance? Do you remember?
I don't remember specifically which ones were canceled, but I did hear some were canceled.
Some, but not necessarily all. Was the lobbying piece canceled?
I will follow up and find you an answer.
Thank you. That's all I have. But I do look forward to seeing, results of your forensic audit and the negotiations and possibly recouping some of these taxpayer dollars. Looking forward to it.
Will we get any kind of follow-up?
We'll do a
This
follow-up
report.
with this, just like we do with our audits. We will maintain contact with them until, that's part of the reason that Paul's meeting with them on Friday, is to kind of set out a timeline, because we have to do our recommendation follow-up, just like we would with an audit. So there will be a report when this is all implemented.
Other questions?
I'm good.
Yes, but we can move along.
Questions we may not be able to get answered today. I understand that part of
Can I
it.
just ask a process question?
Sure.
So I think, understanding kind of the typical cadence or process of an internal audit with, recommendations, department responds, they say, we'll address these within a certain time frame, and then you kind of have the follow-up piece. I understand what is happening now, and I think that's good, but how does that sort of come back here? Will there just be kind of standard updates on each agenda until that's fully reconciled, or will we just kind of hold space and wait till they're all addressed and then do it at one time? Like,
If you'd like, normally it would be that kind of how we have that recommendation follow-ups. You would see it on there as far as like their next implementation date, and you would kind of follow that process. However, if this one, or any of them, if you ever have more interest in it and you would like us to do a regular update, especially after we meet with them and kind of get the action plan that they have, we can put it as old business on the next agenda and have it as a moving item. If
That's
we
my
wanna follow.
preference. I don't know if we need to vote on that or not.
I would say just something that's, it's investigatory, there's a high financial implication, there's stuff in progress. It seems odd to kind of, sometimes some of those little internal process things, it's like, whatever, 6 months later, we'll check back with you, this seems like something that needs maybe a more frequent cadence of follow-up.
Do we need to vote on that or just
No,
taking
we
it
can
under advisement?
We'll record it in the minutes and we'll just keep doing it. Keep it on the next agenda.
We're also on camera. Yeah.
I would also say to this, I don't know whether this is to finance or to legal, but it seems to me that there's a systemic issue here that crosses all of these allegations about how they're handling contracts. That's got to be addressed somewhere in this process.
And I guess to that point, that's my concern, is that there's finances involved working on that end of things, but there are some real legal challenges here that it's not clear to me there's anybody really working on that part of things. And so for your meeting on Friday, maybe that gets answered, but that's really what I'm worried about.
And should it be someone from Metro, because we so heavily subsidize, should it be outside counsel like they have, or we don't know if they have, to your point, or should it be in addition to someone from Metro Legal or Finance to be there to make sure that these things are, I's are being dotted and T's are being crossed, right? And is that a you question?
I mean,
I would defer to legal on the legal questions.
But on contract management.
I mean, I will be happy to have conversations with General Hospital on the contract management process and kind of help them along. But as far as legal legal language, everything, I would defer over to Metro Legal.
I just think somebody from Metro, and if that's a piece of legislation that needs to be passed, I mean, I'm already talking with Director Dietz and Director Darby about how to sort of protect ourselves from what happened last week that we had to agree to based off of minutes, and a board that is really no longer intact from 2020, approving retroactive deferred compensation to that extent. I mean, it's one thing if it's $150,000, it's a whole nother thing when it's, almost $1 million. Should they have that amount of latitude when they're so heavily subsidized? Again, I don't care what you do if you're using your own revenue, but they're not. And so you're playing with somebody else's money, you're playing with 750,000 people's money. And there needs to be more accountability to that. And so if the hospital authority's authority needs to be checked in some way, or at least guardrail managed, and where we're looking at contracts and making sure that it's fiscally responsible to make the agreements that they are making, then that's what we need to do. Unless and until they are able to stand on their own 2 feet.
I see what you're saying. In terms of contract management, I think that maybe I didn't make my point very clearly before. Derek Smith from our office and Matthew Garth, I believe they represent the hospital board, but I think that the hospital has generally in the past employed their own attorney, I think, for contract management. This is all like knowledge that you're tapping into from like 7 years ago, and this isn't my client, but I think this is a further conversation with Director Dietz to have about like, what authority does the hospital have? Is that under the purview of the director of law beyond just the hospital board? And I don't know the answer to that question, but we can certainly find it out.
But then the question begs, like, okay, so you've got Derek Smith of Metro Legal that is advising the authority. Well, typically, so I serve on several boards, whatever, and they'll tell us if we're messing up, if we're breaking the law, but they don't necessarily offer or opine on, is this contract a responsible thing to do, right? I think that's where we need the guardrails, because yes, they didn't have contracts. They had contracts that they had executed but had not been approved by the board, but you don't know, like, it wasn't ever presented to the board. So you're talking about something outside of the scope of what they're looking at. So that's another problem. So yes, we've established we need to have these contracts be approved, but Mr. Smith is not necessarily gonna opine on, is this the best use of taxpayer dollars? And that's where I think we need to have more of an opinion and guardrail around of, you know, okay, you have to have a certain, whatever these professional services are, but, so that's where I would say we need someone from Metro that is advising, but also has the taxpayers' best interests at heart. Does that make sense?
I see your point.
That's, so I don't know how to articulate that. We'll figure it out, I guess, because I'm talking with
Director
Dietz and Darby.
Dietz. Yeah, I think they got you.
Okay.
Also, like that said, members of the authority are supposed to have.
Well, true, but they have no, so that's my problem with these boards and commissions and authorities that have so much power, is that there's no accountability there. If they do something or approve something or fail to approve something and it's wrong,
Right.
they can just resign and go home. You know, there's nothing there. So when you have authority like that without responsibility or accountability, things like this are going to go awry, and especially when you're talking about the amount of money that we're talking about.
They need like a commensurate support structure to make sure that they get all the advice that they need.
Yes, in my opinion, yes.
Any other questions before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, Lauren,
It's the district attorney's.
Attorney's office. Yeah.
We're gonna let people kind of shift if we can.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for being with us.
Jeremy on here. So, we have next on the agenda, the audit of district attorney's office. This is an audit we put on the plan because we have not been out to the district attorney's office in over 10 years. And it's a very impactful part of Metro. So we had our newly promoted Auditor 2, Jeremy Waldorf, perform this audit with 3 objectives. And that was to look at the processes, controls around revenues, expenditures, and assets. So we looked at many things and found that the district attorney's office had many great processes in place, but we did have observations. We ended up having 7 observations and 11 recommendations for this audit. All of those recommendations were accepted. I'm going to go through each observation with those recommendations. So the first observation we had was related to salary supplement and the goal of those salary supplements. Back in 2017, General Funk requested additional funding within his budget to supplement the pay for assistant district attorneys. The salaries for assistant district attorneys are set by a TCA, Tennessee Code. And so he has no control over how much they are paid. However, he's competing with the public defender for similar employees, which is Metro funded, and Metro sets their salaries. So in order to be competitive, he asked for salary supplements, for $10,000 supplement for assistant district attorneys and $20,000 supplement for supervising assistant district attorneys. That amount was awarded in his budget and has continued since 2017. However, it's never been reevaluated. So we did an evaluation and comparison between the entry-level public defender salary in the DA's office and the upper level. The reason we didn't do in between is because there's so many different things can affect the pay scales in between. And we found that the discrepancy between the salaries is that the public defender's making quite a bit more in their entry-level salaries, which means that the goal of that salary supplement request in the beginning is no longer being achieved. And so with that, we recommended first, since this isn't documented in anybody's employment letter or anything, that you document it. If you're gonna use it for competitive reasons, it's something to document so that people know they're gonna be getting it on top of their salary. And the second is to come up with a methodology to evaluate it annually to see if that amount needs to be adjusted, more funds need to be requested to make sure that that supplement is meeting the goal. Our second observation was additionally had to do with the salary supplement, but it had to do with the tax treatment of it. So the district attorney's office is a unique office where they have some employees that are Metro employees and some employees that are state employees. So they're paid directly by the state and others are paid directly by Metro. With Metro employees, that salary supplement runs through payroll and it's paid quarterly. So that goes through the normal payroll process. For the state employees, the state will not process the supplement. So instead, what the DA's office was doing was paying them as vendors. So they would get a quarterly payment as a vendor. And at the end of the year, they'd get a 1099.
Self-employment tax.
And so they were treated as independent contractors. But to be an independent contractor, the work you're supposed to be doing has to be outside of your normal job. And that was not the case for this. For the employees, the taxes are not all that different, but it is the incorrect tax treatment. So for that, we did recommend that they work to make sure that those supplements are paid and treated properly under the IRS tax code. And I believe that they're working with Metro Finance and HR to try to figure out how to get that supplement processed.
Why? So the state employees that receive the supplement from Metro is being 1099'd. Wouldn't it just be a heck of a lot easier to just put it through regular payroll instead of 1099 and just have, right?
That's what we're doing. That's the recommendation, and that's what's going to occur.
And this has taken
now.
how long to figure out?
I mean, we just issued the report.
But I mean, how long has this been going on? How long have we been 1099ing folks? Where,
I believe since 2017 when the supplement would have started.
yeah, which is illegal because they're not independent
But I
contractors.
think that the hard part is that the state wouldn't process it, and so it was because the state does have to pay certain employees trying to figure out that relationship.
Right, but we never should, right, but you still have to operate.
Yes.
And so we have been illegally paying them 1099 and making them pay these payroll taxes for self-employment tax, which I've paid for years and it's terrible. But, you know, like, it's 2025, it's like 8 years that these people, I just don't understand why it takes so long to figure out that, number one, we're breaking the law, and number two, it's costing those employees, they're not independent contractors, that much more money. How often is TCA, or is the state reevaluating what they are paying?
Okay, I will defer to Nancy White, who is the CFO for the DA's office, if you know that.
The assistant district attorney's salaries are set by statute, and it is only changed in two circumstances: if they file a bill to totally change that scale, and then if general state employees are given a salary increase, a percentage, that will change the scale, and that's the only two instances. And because those are set by statute is why the state refuses to add anything for Metro to it, because that means then they're in violation of statute, because it doesn't match the scale.
So really the only way for us to handle this, because they're not gonna change the law at the state level, because it affects every single state employee, correct?
Well, every single assistant district attorney, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the only way for us to handle it is to do the supplement. We just need to start putting them through regular payroll. Okay.
Which
That-
means they would get two different checks, I guess?
Yes.
They were already getting 2 different checks.
Well, that's true. Okay, fair enough.
If I may, Chair, pose a
Please.
question kind of about the state piece, right? So I get it, 95 counties, ADAs, this is what they're paid by statute. But I wonder, is there any other place in Tennessee code where there are standard salaries? I mean, it is one thing to be an ADA in Cookeville, Tennessee versus you are living here in Nashville, right? And whether the CPIU or something that's set as a standard, so there's no
It's one
other.
scale for all of that job class,
Okay,
regardless of if you're in Memphis or Johnson City.
okay. Hello.
Y'all talking about us?
Yeah.
We're talking about the
Does that scale
state law
apply?
scale, yeah.
Yeah, does that scale apply even if they're paid by Metro? You said this- okay.
Okay, and there's, to your knowledge, there's no other example, I mean, I know as it relates to ADAs or y'all's office, but in any other, I mean, we have a fair number director of, like, today I was out at the agricultural extension open house, right? And there's, they're kind of state employees / Metro employees because state law, there's an agricultural extension in every single county, but, Metro kind of comes alongside or supplements that. Like, I would imagine that's true too in Knoxville or Memphis or some of our other big cities. I know we're one of few city-county consolidated, but no other examples to your knowledge of things that are kind of set in state statute having some sort of metric to judge against that, all these counties aren't different as it to cost of living. So it seems a little odd that they're just setting it in state statute and saying if you live in upper Tennessee in a really rural county, you're going to get paid the same thing as you get paid in Nashville. I don't know if district attorney can speak to that, but has the state ever looked at the things that they kind of codify and set, giving a scale?
The state has not.
Okay.
And it is outrageous, and it's more pronounced now than it has ever been. Because I think that, the graphs
Right.
have gone up, but the separation is even more pronounced. And of the big four, I think everybody has some supplements, but varying amounts. One of the reasons that we did this the first time is because after the salary study in 2014 and 15 created a gap where the public defenders were paid more than prosecutors. Then what we did was we talked to Metro government and said, can we do what's essentially a local salary adjustment? I mean, TSA employees that are working in Dallas are going to get more than the ones that are working in Midland, Odessa. And so the feds have a system in place for local salary adjustments based upon cost of living in the various parts of the country. Tennessee's never done that. And so this was frustrating back when it happened to us in 2015 and we reached rough parity because the mayor and the council understood that they had worked for a long period of time to try to get pay parity because for a long period of time, public defenders were paid less than district attorneys. And I can make an argument that DAs should be paid more, but all we really want to talk about is parity amongst the lawyers that are working Metro Legal, public defenders, and DAs, right? I'm fine with that. Because there was a 75% rule that was put in place way back when Bill Purcell was the majority leader of the state legislature and the state house, because public defenders' offices were chronically underfunded. So if local governments increase budgeting for prosecutors, then by law, the budget has to include a 75% increase for the public defenders. But the reciprocal is not true. And so when we give the public defenders more, if we give the public defenders $100,000 extra, the council isn't required to give us $133,000. But if you were to give us $100,000 we're required to give them $75,000. It took us 3 to 4 years to get the local salary adjustment the last time we got out of balance because of the 75% rule. This time I know that Public Defender Johnson Moore is asking for additional funds because she does in fact need more employees. And we're having a serious issue with regards to getting more appointed counsel to take appointed cases over there. And if the Public Defender's Office with more employees can take a higher percentage, that will relieve some of the problems that the trial courts are having. And so given that they have a need for extra employees, I'm not asking for a bunch of new employees, I'm just asking for our current employees to be able to be paid. Hopefully you've already made this point before I walked in, that our city does not pay people to represent criminals more than we're paying the lawyers that are trying to promote public safety. I think we're the only jurisdiction in the country, I know we were back in 2015 or 16, that had that inverse ratio where they were paying the lawyers for the criminals more than the prosecutors. And like I said, I just want to be paid. I just want us to be paid roughly the same. So that's what our ask is. And I appreciate the audit pointing that out because that had happened and nobody even alerted us. And maybe I should have been more closely monitoring the budget last year and seeing that had happened. It's not going to happen again. We're going to be monitoring that. And I don't begrudge them their increase. I think Metro Legal and public defenders deserve even more. But one of the good things I have is that we actually have the very best job in the country because all legal, because no prosecutor ever has to stand in front of a court and argue a position they don't believe in. Right? If you're a defense attorney or if you're a civil lawyer, it depends on what your client wants, and then you have to argue their position. If you're a prosecutor and you walk in there and you don't believe they committed the crime, your job is to dismiss the case. If you think they're charged with first-degree murder, or if they're charged with first-degree murder, but you think after investigation they're only dead to second degree, you can stand up and say, Judge, we're amending this charge to second-degree murder. So there is a certain advantage to working in the job where you get the rewarding part of always being able to believe in what you're saying in front of any judge or jury, and there's a certain reward to knowing that you're actually contributing to public safety. Those are great, and so I'm proud of the fact we've been able to recruit what I consider to be the best law firm in the state, but I got to retain them, and as people take other jobs or retire, I need to make sure I can continue to recruit, and that's why I've just got, this is I don't want to, this is a have to for us. And so I really appreciate the audit giving me the heads up on this.
The 75% reciprocal, is that a metro law or is that a state law?
It's a state law.
And is it on the increase or the, just
On the
relative?
increase.
On the increase.
Yeah, it's not on the relative, because Metro actually pays our public defender's office more than they
Right.
contribute. But that's not really a fault of Metro Council, that's the fault of the state, because under a formula that they put together 20 years ago, they have been grossly underfunding.
So are we
Public
having
defender's
conversations with state legislators about that? Because it's a pretty easy problem to understand.
Yeah.
At one point, there was even a lawsuit, and I'm trying to think if that was Carl Dean, Ross Alderman, or Don Diener, but they even sued the state to say, wait a second, these formulas are wrong, and as you give increased money for Polk County and for Fentress County, you've underfunded the increases that should have been coming to Davidson County, and they lost that. And because we were grandfathered in when they created the Public Defenders Conference in the 70s, they grandfathered us in Memphis because we were the two places that had already had a public defender's office. Then they have ended up treating both offices kind of like stepchildren and not.
Sounds like you need a lobbyist. I'm kidding.
But look, the public, and the current executive director of the whole Public Defenders Conference is Patrick Froeg, who's a Nashvilleian and who had a long time practice. And he understands that issue, but he has to represent all 32 judicial districts. But really that needs to be cured at the state level, and probably needs to be cured by maybe some soul searching amongst our legislature as far as what in the world they're doing with the public defender's offices in these two counties. But that's their lane. I'll be glad to help them. I'll be glad to add my voice to it, but I don't want to go to the legislature unless I'm invited to speak on their behalf, but I would certainly do so. Because it's also on behalf of Metro taxpayers.
All right, how far did we get here?
Observation paper.
Okay, you want me to keep on with the, okay. So the next observation that we had was around contract management. We did see a temporary services contract that it had a start date but no definitive end date. And it also didn't have hourly rates. The work was being done, the work was being invoiced, but it was being invoiced for a rate, an overarching rate with no clear amount per hour. And since the total sum of it is more than the $25,000 over the year and a half that it was outside of procurement code. And so we would recommend that contract go through the proper contracting process to follow the Metro procurement code for that one. Our next one related to computer inventory management. This was actually something that they alerted us to when we started this audit, how ITS maintains a list of computer inventory. And then the district attorney's office maintains their own internal inventory. What we found was there was a large discrepancy between the two, kind of because of disconnect between ITS when they would deploy it, but they weren't taking computers off of it. And so we were trying to trace things from ITS's inventory to what was on site and on site back to that. And there are just a number of discrepancies. And what happens is that feeds into, by having a higher number of inventory with ITS, that feeds into the internal service fees that are then charged to the department. So we recommended that, the three entities at JIS, which manages the computers, as well as DA's office and ITS, get together, establish that inventory, that accurate inventory, because we do need to have an accurate inventory since there's such secured information on them. Make sure that there's something in place, and then set up a procedure to make sure that when they're deployed, they're added, when they're retired, they're taken off. So that everybody knows where it is. But the Public Defender's Office actually had the best inventory out of the three, and was doing their own internal procedures. It was just filtering up to the Metro Department. The next one had to do with the revenue process. There's not much revenue within the Public Defender's Office, or I keep saying public district attorney, I'm so sorry. Within the district attorney's office, there's not many revenues that come in. There's FOIA requests. We just needed more documentation around it. One person was kind of checking it, and documenting it and counting it. We would, with any cash, whether it's a lot or a little, we want more security around it and having two-person integrity. The other piece of that is that they get reimbursements from the state. They get reimbursed for rent, and that's calculated based on the number of state employees they have at the time. We tried to reperform some of those invoices and had a few discrepancies in that. And so we would just recommend that when they're documenting how they came up with the reimbursement requests to the state, how they are calculating that and asking for that reimbursement. The next one was related to travel for witness and victims. The state reimburses this as well. Requests were being sent. There's a timing difference on when the state will send the money back, and there just wasn't a reconciliation between the two to make sure that you're getting all of the funding and reimbursed. So that was that one. The next one was invoice management. This one was a low risk one. We just looked at a sample of invoices and saw some things like late payments, paying taxes. It's small things that can add up over time, and so we make the recommendation to make sure that you understand the purchasing rules and don't pay certain taxes and things like that, and just have the training on that. And the last one was about records for credit card purchases. Some of the records just didn't have enough detail for us to verify certain aspects of them, and so we would recommend that those credit cards, those purchases, maintain those records. Like I said, we had 12 recommendations on this one. All of them, I think it's 12, all of them were accepted. They have already begun implementing many of them and are working their way to implementing them. If there's any additional questions.
Chair, thank you. On observation E, regarding revenues particular to FOIA. And so I guess, when I'm looking at these, often it's, okay, this is how this department is handling a particular process procedure, but also every department in Metro gets FOIA'd. I've been FOIA'd, we've all been FOIA'd, you know. Obviously, there's, you know, whether it's charged or not charged, particular to, you know, court cases and records and confidentiality and things like that. I understand, you know, that's a challenge, maybe especially with your department. But I wonder, there's a particular recommendation for the DA's office, but when we think about Metro in general as a very large government with multiple departments that often gets FOIA'd, is there any thought around, I mean, just everybody's gonna do it their own way, and I guess there's sort of, you know, standard best practices or, you know, attorney or legal, how do we respond to that? But have we ever thought of kind of like consolidating FOIA requests in one particular, you know, place so that every single, I mean, as far as the revenue or the, did you get it back timely? Obviously, every department has to do their own internal search for, but I just wonder, can we speak into maybe FOIA more generally? So I get this is the DA's office, but what do we do
So we did do
otherwise?
the public records audit a while back as far as just like the process.
Right.
Not necessarily around the revenues aspect of it, and much of it goes through the county or through the Metro clerk.
Okay,
There are certain departments, some of the larger departments do have their own person. They have a person that is designated as their records person. Even our department, though, the Metro clerk may send us the records request, we have somebody within our department who's our records person. We have not thought about doing it on a larger scale as far as looking at standard procedures. Similar to this, we would, if we do an audit of a different department, we would look at this, we would evaluate these revenues and determine if we would do any procedures around it. I do know that when we have looked at other departments, it's getting smaller and smaller because it's just more records can be provided electronically instead of the charges that are usually set out by code, I believe, as far as how much they can charge per page and stuff like that.
is that the same standard that the DA's office follows? It's just a Metro standard, it's not because you have a higher burden for certain legal protections?
Per
or-
page.
Okay.
Yep. So we have not looked at that, but that is something to take into consideration.
It just seems like if there's a standard Metro per page cost for FOIA and time allowed, the fact that you pay the DA's office, or you pay this office, or you pay that office, it seems like you should be like, Metro FOIA goes to this account, right? That, I don't know, but it is your staff's time potentially, so anyway, I'm just kind of.
I'm not sure, I can't speak across all of it.
It has implications all across
Yeah.
Metro.
And then it also depends on whether or not they're under like the Metro clerk. You can elect to be your own department as far as receiving your own requests and following your own procedures. So it may, I mean, it depends on that, as well as I do think the courts even are a little bit different because those are not Metro, and the courts get a lot of those requests.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And so it also there would have different procedures. So I think it's hard to standardize. We possibly could within the Metro departments, but it would be harder on a larger scale across like the courts.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Chair, if I may, I guess I'm going to ask another, again, Metro standard best practice. So the discrepancy between the ITS, that, you know, the internal management of this computer, that monitor, this laptop, whatever, ITS in particular, I presume they have a standard way of doing that with each department?
For
And-
Metro departments. This is one of those
Okay,
situations
again,
where
right.
it's a little bit different because the DA's office is managed by JIS, which was the report we
Right.
went through in January.
Yeah.
Since JIS plays a role in it, I believe, is it ITS is responsible for the deployment?
ITS is responsible for the deployment of Metro.
Of Metro.
departments. JIS is responsible for deployment at like the DA's.
And then you also have, since the DA's office has state employees, some of them have state-issued equipment, is that correct as well? Yes.
Interesting.
So there's this,
Okay.
this mix.
All the orders of complexity.
We were able to get the state to pay for fresh laptops, total number roughly 80, a year and a half ago, which was nice not to have to come to the Metro Council to ask for that technology, but to have the state actually pick something up that was appreciated.
Thank you. That was all my questions.
Next, we have government vehicle crashes, so now we're gonna flip everybody.
I don't think we had any of those last year, so I'm gonna excuse myself.
Appreciate the way that you responded. I wanted to say that. We get these letters, you know, accepting or not accepting or whatever, and the way that you,
Yep.
is my favorite
No, we're good.
of everyone,
Thank you.
because it's not just accepted, right? You have some context to it, and so I appreciate that. It helps to understand that you know what's going on.
I want to be responsive.
It's a lawyer for you, right?
Yeah,
Exactly. ABC 1, 2, 3, 1E, 2E, 3.
This is David Jones, he's an assistant DA, and I wanted him just to come up just to participate in this, so thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today.
Congratulations.
Thank you for your work. Thank you, Chairman.
I just remember having
Precious.
Does we need to come in here? Okay. And then?
Everybody's coming. All right, so on March 24th, we issued the audit of Metro Nashville vehicle crashes. We had 4 objectives, so I'm going to go through each of the objectives really fast. You just tell us what we tested under each objective, and I'll go over the observations we had. So the first objective, are there comprehensive training, safety requirements, and disciplinary actions in place within the general government to ensure vehicles are operated safely and as intended? So as part of this objective, we sampled Metro employees, including employees that have been in a vehicle accident during our audit period, and to see if they were current on trainings like defensive driving training. We surveyed Metro Nashville employees, asked about vehicle safety training, driver discipline, safety policy, and just the safety culture, how they felt about the safety culture within their departments. We sampled employees that were at fault in an accident that resulted in a settlement. So that's the best way we determined to find employees that might have been at fault, is if a settlement was paid out. And that's not always the case, but that's how we chose our sample. And then we requested disciplinary records from the departments to see what those look like. We did an analysis of employees that were in multiple accidents during the audit period, and to nail down those employees, and then ask for disciplinary records from the department for those instances, and there weren't many of those. All right, for the second observation, are there procedures in place for departments to accurately report vehicle crashes to general services for efficient and effective repair management? So OFM has an accident repair program, kind of policy procedure in place. So we sampled vehicle accidents during the audit period, and we basically just ran those through the process from start to finish, and made sure all the documentation was there, tested the controls, and so that's how we tested that objective. Observation 3, are processes in place to ensure the Department of Law effectively evaluates crashes, and the Metro Nashville government pays an appropriate settlement. And the same thing with there's a claim policy in place, so we isolated the settlements that were paid for auto accidents by Metro employees, and went through the claim policy and made sure all the documentation was there to support the settlement, all the approvals were in place. Observation 4, are processes in place to evaluate vehicle crashes to determine if employees require additional training or other actions due to large settlements or recurring crashes. So for this, I should mention that the scope of the audit, we focused on the larger departments that would obviously have more vehicle crashes. So there's police, water, Nashville Department of Transportation, Parks, and the Sheriff's Office are the departments we looked at. So we requested all of their policies and procedures, and generally it would be in a safety policy, and look to see if they had specific procedures in place. If an employee gets in an accident,
so they know what to do and what the process to go through, and then also explains how that department's going to evaluate the accident. So we evaluated those policies and procedures. We also contacted cities to see how they did crash evaluations. Most of them had a decentralized process like we have, where mainly the departments are, it's up to the departments to do those evaluations. But we did find close to half of those cities had some sort of committee in place that would at least evaluate or do a review of all the crashes within the city. So that kind of leads into our first observation about vehicle crash evaluations. So we found that there could be the oversight around crash data and evaluations could be improved. One of the things we noted is that you have multiple departments involved in this process. So you have OFM that does the repairs, Department of Law does the claims, Human Resources does IOD, injury on duty. And because of that, a lot of that, so there is an IOD fund that kind of through internal service fees, I believe, so that does touch departments. But a lot of these don't kind of hit the department's budget, so there's not really a financial impact. And departments obviously probably care about the safety of their employees, but there's not like a financial motivation to make sure that we, really take vehicle crashes seriously. The total crash, so we took everything that was spent for vehicle crashes during the audit period. It came out to $9.3 million. There's a chart in the background that kind of breaks that down. So one of the things we recommended, or we thought would be good, is to have a review process and framework developed for reviewing crashes across all of Metro, to have a group do that. After some discussions, we thought that the Safety Review Board would be a good starting point for that. And so we did make the recommendation to that. The recommendation is to that board. When they meet, there'll be a discussion. We can present our recommendation, and they can decide whether they want to accept it or not.
I have a quick question about that $9 million.
Yeah.
You have $4 million on your chart and $9 million on your narrative.
Sorry, I think that's, we didn't do a total. So if you...
Should have been a total column.
Sorry, that's the total.
Right,
we probably should have had a total.
That's replacement vehicles only. It's not total.
Yeah, so sorry. I noticed that actually when I was reading the report that we probably should have done that. But yeah, if you add the bottom line across, that's the 9 million. Sorry about
I
that.
gotta do my own math. It's fine.
Okay, observation B was the claim approval and policy update. We'd had a random sample of 47 claims that were paid out during the audit period. It was pretty good. There was one claim that was missing approval documentation, so we actually looked at an additional 10 claims just to kind of stretch out our sample, and we didn't find any other issues with that. There were 10 claims that were approved, but not by the correct party. So 9 claims should have been approved by the settlement committee, and 1 actually should have been approved by Metro Council, but kind of slipped through the cracks and was not. Another thing that we noted under this observation is that the claim policy was from 2006. It hasn't been updated since then, so there are some things that the policy said they should do, but they weren't doing anymore. So one of our recommendations is to go back and review that and update it to more kind of reflect the current operations of the claims office. For vehicle accident repair, we chose a sample of 47 repairs that were from vehicles that were crashed during the audit period. Just some minor things with that. Documentation basically just needs to be improved. There were 9 out of 47 that were missing a Kelly Blue Book or some sort of analysis to compare like what the cars were versus repairing it to see if the repair should even be done. So those are missing in a few instances. There's a Form 105 that when an employee gets in an accident, the department is responsible for submitting that form. It gets sent out to like claims and OFM, and that kind of starts the process for all this. And that Form 105 should be on the work order, and that was not for 4 out of the 47. So our recommendation.
4 of the 47, you said?
Yeah.
So roughly a little less than 10%?
Yeah. So, but there's also, we had to use that Form 105 a lot for to find the analysis we did for employees that were in multiple accidents, we actually had to go through and look at the 4105 to determine who those employees were. And during that testing, we found like 27 more that weren't on there out of several hundred. So there were a few instances where that should be improved. So our recommendation was just to make sure that all the analysis is done and the work orders include the Form 105, so someone can actually go back on that work order and see which employee was involved in the accident, get any other information about the accident that's needed. We looked at defensive driving. There was about 11% of employees out of 57 were not compliant with defensive driving. OFM has an administrative order that details all the responsibilities for fleet coordinators. We made a recommendation that that administrative order be updated to include a responsibility of fleet coordinators, just to make sure their departments have some process in place for monitoring compliance with defensive driving. Yes.
So of the 57 employees that you reviewed the records on, were those random or those were ones that had been involved in vehicle crashes?
It was a mix. So we did it for everyone, and then we also did an additional sample of that were specific that got in vehicle crashes.
And was the percentage pretty much the same for
It
both
was,
of those
yeah.
groups?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so that's basically it. We had 5 medium risk observations, 1 low risk observation. Like I said, one of those has not been accepted yet because it's for the Safety Advisory Board and they have not met. So when they meet, we'll get an acceptance or a rejection for that recommendation. And then Nan Nguyen is here. She did the work on the audit, and then we have some representatives from Office of Fleet Management here if you have any questions for us.
Thank you. Does this include heavy fleet as well? Accident crashes related to our heavy fleet in any of our departments? Or just regular vehicles, passenger vehicles?
I know so the fire department audit was going on at the same time, so certain parts of that
Yes,
were
certain
scoped
parts
out.
of fire were scoped out because we were looking at the maintenance and repairs piece of fire. So for heavy equipment, it would not include fire. This was not included within that.
But it would for NDOT and water and all that. Okay. Have we differentiated between crashes that were caused by the Metro employees versus
At
not?
fault. What percentage are at fault?
So it's hard to determine. So like I said before, it was to find out who was at fault, we had to think about how to isolate that because there wasn't like a universe of employees that were at fault or not. So the way we did that for our testing is we looked at claims that were paid out. But that's not 100% either because, you can an employee can get in an accident and it not be their fault or still gonna pay a settlement. But that was the best way we knew to kind of at least try to capture employees that were at fault.
So what percentage of accidents had claims paid? I mean, I see the amount, but what's the percentage?
Is that in the, we might have to get that to you. I don't know if
Because, I mean, if that's your kind of proxy
Yeah.
for at fault, I think that's really important for us to know.
It's a little bit bothersome that we don't have a very quick way to look at that. I mean, so if it's not an at-fault accident, so if our Metro employee was not at fault, someone was because something went wrong.
Right.
And so you should have an insurance claim attached to it, right? Because if you hit me, I'm gonna file a claim against your insurance company, and Metro government should be doing the same thing, and that should be documented. Or if you are uninsured, that should be documented as well. So that the fact that we don't have that information shows me that we are not doing cost recovery the way that we should. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
You can't query how many insurance claims, you know how many crashes we've had.
Right.
We're either paying out a claim or we should be cost recovery.
Yeah, I think Stacy would agree, because I know we talked about the limitations of the fleet management system at the fire department audit. And so querying vehicle crashes, it's the same where it's a lot of it's dependent on the input, so it was hard for us to.
But wouldn't this be at the Department of Law? The Department of Law is the one that's paying out the claims.
Yes, and
Shouldn't
they
they
would-
be the ones suing on behalf?
Yeah, and I think their insurance should be on the claim file. I think we are capturing that. It's just, as far as pulling our sample, however many, we'd have to go through each file and kind of, so we were just trying to think of an efficient way to pull. So that's why we did it the way we did it.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, there's no question that claims are getting paid out, because if you have people in a crash, they're going to sue us. Like, that, they don't fail to sue us. They're gonna get their money. My question is, we're not all at fault. These are not 100% at fault accidents. And so while we're paying out, we should also be cost recovering. And so whether that's fleet management needing to coordinate with the law department, because if we're paying out $9.3 million over the course of 2 years for not only repairs, but also for vehicle replacement, if that vehicle was totaled, how much of that should have been recovered? Again, we're paying out willy-nilly, not willy-nilly, but we're paying out quite a bit of money. And this is not our dollars. These are taxpayer dollars. So we should be recouping that. And so do we need to double down and ask on for a follow-up audit on our claims, our cost recovery procedures? And it seems to me that if we've got over 500 per year crashes that are going to result in some sort of claim, whether we are getting the claim or paying out the claim, that is a heck of a lot of lawsuits or insurance companies or whatever for any department to do, whether you combine someone from fleet management and law, because I would think that there would be some sort of overlap there. I know that there's software out there that can assist in this. I think that's something I've been talking about it actually for several years, and I continue to get, I discussed that with you when we were on council together. That is something that I think is a responsible thing to do, because like I said, for you to not know, not your fault, but for you to not know of these 1,074 vehicle accidents, Metro was at fault for X% of them, because we either have paid out a claim or we have received something back, or it was identified as an uninsured motorist claim, correct? I mean, that seems reasonable to me. Who would be the most appropriate department? Would that be Department of Law, or would it be these guys over here?
As far as cost recovery, I think that would be the claims office.
In the Department of Law?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
One other data point I think would be helpful in this chart is the number of crashes we're talking about. I mean, so I don't know if Metro Water Services has substantially more vehicles than anybody else, but it surprises me that they're second on the list and the highest in claims paid. So I don't know if that, and the reason I mention that is because I don't know if that means there was one particularly severe accident where we had to pay out a significant claim.
So
Waste trucks.
Waste is under Metro Water right now,
Garbage trucks.
and they have been for the last 2 years.
Trash trucks.
So I can guarantee you that a lot of that, and we're beating the absolute hell out of our trash trucks, no question about it. And so, well, that's the truth, we're beating the hell out of
But these are
it.
claims paid, which
Right,
is,
because, but it's also damage to our vehicles. So when you're talking about a dollar amount, when you're saying it's surprising for Metro Water.
that would be work order cost, right? Or replacement vehicles?
Replacement vehicles.
Beating our trucks. What I'm saying is claims paid is a proxy for claims that we've paid to other people that we have damaged or injured.
How many claims are within the total for
Right,
claims
right.
paid?
Right.
Like, we need that number. Yeah.
So either your vehicle's going fast or it's big.
So do you know that? So you've got all these total costs. So let's say we're talking about, to his point, claims paid for Metro Water Services is, in that 2 year period, $790,000. How many claims did that? Was it like 2 massive claims, or was it tons of little
We
claims?
could break it down. I have it in a spreadsheet, but.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good number to
claims,
know,
yeah.
and if you could also separate out, because we are about to create a new department, it is not a department yet, waste and actual water vehicles, but trash trucks, pup trucks, front loaders, side loaders, all those, everything related to waste services, I think needs to be separated out, just so we can have a better idea, because waste and water are obviously
Yeah.
two different things.
We might have to get with claims on that because I don't know what the information they had separates that out. I'm sure it can.
I think that would be helpful information, and you can just, for this, for all intents and purposes, just have a caveat of, okay, Metro Water Services, because waste is operating under an MOU currently, so just put it under there, but separate it out, because I think that's, to his point, it's important to know, because that is a lot of heavy fleet, and that stuff is really expensive. every single one of those trucks is over $100,000.
Right, and fleet can assist with some of the asset numbers to help you determine what is waste services or water. Because we've kind of already split them up in our system, prepared for that.
I'd also be interested to know, so I think at some budget hearing in the past, when General Services was there, I kind of made an ask or suggestion, it seemed so piddly, but it was basically like, how's my driving? Call 311. Do you see them on the bumpers now? For some reason, they did not put a question mark on there, which really drives me crazy. I was like, oh, look, I asked for it in a budget hearing, and there it is. They're on all the cars. And I think maybe Velvet Hunter or somebody in General Services had shared at some juncture the number of people that were actually calling 311. I think it's sort of an awkward prompt to folks, but it's like, but not while you're driving, like, don't hands-free, but it's an accountability mechanism. Like, we do want to know if people in Metro vehicles, and I think whether NES or others, right, they have a more kind of specific, like, this is my actual vehicle number. We have a license plate, so I would presume, but I think that's an important accountability mechanism that, like, if you're out here speeding or swerving or doing, I would hope that a citizen might make safely a note of that and make the call. So in this space, I would be interested to understand how many people are calling that at the prompt of the bumper sticker and saying, I saw this sedan, I saw this truck, it was speeding. So I would be interested to understand that. And then also additionally, have we ever looked at putting speed limiters on our vehicles? Because no Metro employee should be speeding on the roads of Davidson County, the end full stop. And speeding is the primary cause of accidents. So I don't know if
We
we
don't
ever looked
have
at
any,
that.
we don't have any sort of speed limiter on them now. Not to say that we couldn't do that. I know one big thing that General Services and Fleet Management is asking for this year in our budget request are telematics, which is going to open the door technologically. Humongous
Well, I
for
was
us.
just about to say, we already have telematics on our waste vehicles, although we have just replaced a basically brand-new system with something that is completely, anyway, that's a whole nother situation. But there are programs out there and software programs that you can see in real time, how fast is that vehicle going?
Right. That's
Yeah.
something, that telematics system that we're looking into will do that. It also, we're using it on some of our EVs right now to show us mileage, because of course with a fleet system and to have a replacement schedule, our conventional vehicles go to get fuel, constantly. They have to put in a mileage to get that. Electric vehicles, we're not there yet. So the telematics we're actually using on that, and you can use it for that piece.
What are you using, Verizon Connect?
No, ma'am, Samsara. I know Water went with Verizon Connect. I think Waste was looking at something different. Samsara, I think we got off of either Sourcewell or a statewide contract, I can't remember.
So my issue with having multiple different telematics systems is that, first of all, I think y'all know that my preference is to decentralize fleet services. I think every department should be able, or should be responsible for their own fleet. That's a whole different story. But if you're gonna be centralized, everybody needs to use the same system, in my opinion. Because we typically have mechanics, or the people that are monitoring that are monitoring several, and so why make it hard on them to know all these different systems? And you can also typically leverage with that company, hey, if we've got, waste services at 50, but we're gonna do everything, and there's, 1,000 vehicles, that you get a price differential.
That's
Right.
what we've looked at with Samsara. We're actually trying to budget to put them on everything that's part of the fleet allocation as a consolidated fleet. We're wanting to say, hey, here's our piece from it, because of course, like police officers or firemen, we don't house the actual operators, we house the vehicle. So we want to see the vehicle information, and we want to see if there's a piece to allow the fleet coordinators or the department to actually do vehicle mapping, things of that nature, watch those speed limits, things of that nature.
And let me clarify, police, ambulance, fire, go as fast as you want. You're trying to get like,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I just mean like,
That was going
right, I
on.
just mean like, I work for the codes department and I'm going, but I'm out on the interstate driving 80 miles an hour. And I think, with the telematics system and fair warning and driver training, I think if you are in a Metro vehicle that is not a life safety thing and telematics show that you were speeding, I think that needs to have dire consequences relative to your employment, right? As far as the accountability piece. So.
And I would also take with a grain of salt when people call in 311 and, you need to be able to substantiate.
Understood. It's an
I have
imperfect
people
kinda,
say,
yeah.
somebody was driving 70 miles an hour on Hogan. No, they were not driving 70 miles an hour on
Understood.
Hogan.
I absolutely
But if
appreciate
it's also
that's
property standards,
anecdotal.
just gave you a citation, I'm just saying, take that all with a grain of salt. But telematics removes all of that.
Yeah.
Because you can go back and see exactly
Fair.
what happened.
Right. We've had some crazy ones come through Hub Nashville, and that's kind of our thing too. Telematics will tell you everything that you want to know.
Yeah, no, I think as council members, we often know that person was going, 70 miles okay, maybe they were going 40 and it felt like it, but right, I get it, it's anecdotal human error type stuff, so. But I'd still be interested to know how many people are availing themselves of that, because I do think NES, Piedmont, other people who are in kind of public service, the public sphere typically do have that accountability mechanism. If people aren't calling in, if it's not worthwhile, we move to telematics, maybe we don't need to put that.
What's the name
little
of the
bumper
system?
sticker.
Sam what?
Samsara.
Samsara. Do you have a side-by-side on Samsara, Verizon Connect, and Zonar?
I do not. I'm not to say that we can't get that. I'm pretty sure we can.
If you could do that, I think that would be great. And some of that stuff you may know the cost or whatever, because that obviously plays into it. But just the capabilities of the different systems, and some systems are more appropriate for certain fleet than others. But it would be helpful to know really how they compare.
Right.
That'd be super helpful.
Another reason that we decided to choose Samsara is we have a off-the-shelf fleet system. So Faster is an off-the-shelf fleet system. It's built for fleet. That's what it's built for. And we knew that Samsara integrated with that fleet system. So you kind of take some of the human error out of some of that stuff, and it integrates the information right into the portal. And I can say that I think per asset, it's around $165 a year. I want to say,
year?
yeah, I want to say it's like $15 to $16 a month, I think, something like that.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I feel like Verizon Connect was somewhere around 20 per month, which is a little bit less than what you're talking about, but still.
They're on
Okay.
the same ballpark.
Seth, thanks for your work on this.
Thank you.
Next one.
Next, we have a quick one. It's a follow-up audit of Nashville General Hospital human resources process. In October of 2022, we released an audit of the human resources process within Nashville General Hospital. We looked at their hiring practices, the documentation for when they're doing interviews, and the surveyed those that were doing the interviews and see how well they were trained, as well as we looked at the separation, the termination, making sure that the processes were followed there. We have 4 recommendations with that original audit. They covered things like ensuring that documentation of interviews and reasons why certain candidates were selected, that it was there, making sure that the individuals doing the interviewing were properly trained, so that they knew what to record, they knew the questions to ask, and then documenting the separation between what human resources was responsible for, as well as what management was responsible for. When we did some of our surveys, there was some confusion on who was responsible for what, so we asked that that be clarified. And the last one was related to, we had some complaints at the time from former employees who had not known that their benefits were cut off. They didn't know that they were going to be cut off, or they didn't know when. And at the time, Nashville General Hospital was just verbally communicating this. What Metro General does is they issue you have a letter that you sign, the person leaving signs, that basically lays out when your benefits are going to terminate, so that there's acknowledgement that you know that FSA has to be used by this date, or that your insurance is going to stop at this date. So we made the recommendation that General Hospital do that as well. All 4 of these, Nan Nguyen went back out, and all 4 of these recommendations have been implemented. If there's any questions.
Quick question, are they also issuing COBRA?
That I don't know.
I mean, I know this predates me, but just curious, because
That I don't know, but I can.
if you got a COBRA letter, you would know you were terminated as well.
This may be totally out of the scope. We had several years where we heard about budget issues related to having to hire contract employees because they were not able to retain regular employees. Did that?
They would not have been included in this.
Not
No.
included in this. Okay.
Chair, if I may, I'm just gonna say it on anything that has implications on HR, onboarding, outboarding, all that kind of stuff. Exit interviews, I just really think it's important as an organization that we get a
It
handle.
ought to be mandatory.
Yeah, on that.
It was mandatory, I said this at one of the last meetings where I didn't even want to do it, I was like, I just want to leave. Those are the people you really want to hear from.
Yeah.
Parks Department, ready to move to that?
Thank you, Dan.
All right, so
Got off easy.
on March 27th, we released the Metro Nashville Parks and Recreation's cash collections report. Jim Carson was the auditor on this. We appreciate his work. And then we have Assistant Directors Shanita White and John Holmes with us. We appreciate the assistance they gave us and for sticking around for this long meeting. We had two objectives. The first objective was, does the Parks and Recreation Department have adequate procedures and effective controls in place to ensure cash collections are complete, deposited timely, and properly reported? So some of the testing we did for this, we did a random sample of business days throughout the audit period, and we requested the deposit documentation for those days. And we did that at the revenue centers like Centennial Sportsplex, Parthenon, at the golf courses, and also at the permitting office. Since some locations had multiple deposits per day for different sections, it was a total of 140 deposits that we deposit documentation samples that were reviewed. And what kind of brought this audit on, during 2024, last spring through the summer, the Treasury Department notified our office that they were getting deposits back, or notifications from the bank that the money did not match the deposit slip, and this happened 5 times. And so as part of this audit, we went back and kind of looked at those instances to see kind of what happened. And we found that there was no actual financial loss. It was mainly due to clerical errors on those 5 deposits. We also performed observations at revenue centers to kind of observe cash controls and see what was happening on the ground, as well as assess the physical security at those locations. The second objective, does the Parks and Recreation Department have adequate processes and controls to ensure cash collections are monitored and safeguarded? Like I said before, we did observations to check the physical security. We made inquiries into kind of what the Parks Department is doing for revenue monitoring. The accounting office monthly, they have monitoring procedures in place. There was a time in the past that the operational management were getting revenue reports to kind of assist with monitoring. Due to employee turnover, that stopped, and so one of our recommendations is just to start that process back up again. We felt it was a good control to have operational management reviewing revenue too, because they're on the ground and can kind of assess, unusual fluctuations. Also, we had our auditor, Jim rode along with the Parks Police Officer that picks up deposits from each of the locations daily and takes them to the bank to assess that process. We also did an analysis to see if if Parks and Recreation decided to go to the Armored Car Service contract that Metro Nashville has in place, what that financial impact would look like. And that was a part of our testing for that observation as well. So our first observation, we had 4 observations. The first one was just about cash handling controls from when we reviewed all the deposits. Big takeaways there were they have good controls documented at Parks and Recreation, but the 2-person integrity is something that's documented that employees should do. That was not always done. So we had 27 instances, 19% of the deposits did not have that recorded. that two people were involved in Cache County and preparing the deposit. And all the discrepancies that I mentioned before that were reported to us before the audit, when we went back and looked at those, all those would probably not have happened if two people were involved in the deposit. They would have caught the clerical errors, and that wouldn't have got kicked back from the bank. Second observation was physical security controls. Just during the observations, we noted some physical security that could be improved. Those were redacted from the public report, so I won't talk about them here, but they were in the unredacted report you received. So observation C, Parks and Recreation Police Deposit Transport. Like I mentioned, we did an analysis. There is one Parks Police officer that picks up all the deposits daily and takes them to the bank. There's 25 locations. He doesn't go to all those locations daily. Some don't get cash every day, so they'll have to notify him that they're ready for a pickup. He makes around $100,000 with fringe, including fringe benefits, so we used that for that number. And then we did a rough estimate with 25 locations based on what was in the contract for the armored car service. Be a little over $200,000 to use that service, so difference of $100,000. And then, and Shania mentioned also, you're keeping that police officer, and so unless you're not filling a position, technically it's a $200,000 increase. But we recommended that they do their own analysis, review that process that's in place, and consider seeing if that would be wise to request that in the budget, or maybe doing a hybrid approach where maybe an armored car service goes to their higher revenue locations and they figure something else with the other locations. So that was our recommendation there.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, is that because of safety concerns or better communication with the armored car?
Yeah, I think it would be safer, and then you're freeing up a police officer that, we have a kind of highly trained police officer that's really spending full time just doing deposit transport, so maybe that's not the best.
Well, also, so it's not just one officer that has those responsibilities, because that officer is not working every day, all day long. So there's gonna be, right? I mean, like
As far as I know, it's one officer is assigned to that role.
So if that person is on vacation,
I believe, Jim, was there a backup?
I don't know who it was, but I believe he said they had somebody, but I'm not sure which officer.
Yeah, so I guess there was a backup in case someone was out.
I think the captain would assign, whoever.
yeah. We have a safety concern in our parks. I think that's well documented. And we also have a lot of open positions within Parks Police. One of the frustrations, and I've talked to the Parks Police themselves, the frustrations is that they're not doing police work. They're doing Brinks Armored Service work. That's not what they were trained to do. They are trained the same way that our MNPD officers are trained. They are required to have all of the same things, training, qualifications, all those types of things. I'm so glad that this is now in black and white, because this is something that I've been complaining about for years, knowing that it's a complaint within Parks Police. We can't fill those positions. We need those people. So when we talk about a cost, number one, $217,000, you're not gonna go to all 25, and you said this in here, you're not gonna go to all 25 locations every single day. So that $217,000 is going to come down lower. You also will probably have better accuracy, I would assume, when you have someone else doing that and not a police officer who is not trained to do those types of things. That's not technically their job, or it shouldn't be. But also the opportunity cost. When we've got an officer that could be making our parks safer and having a presence there, instead they're they're traveling all around town picking up money and bringing it to the bank, which is absolutely ridiculous. So I'm hoping that Parks takes this recommendation very seriously and makes some changes, because I think that's number one, we will be actually utilizing Parks Police for the job that they were intended to do, which is make public safety better in our parks, get someone else to do what they are trained to do, which is transporting cash in a safe way. I think you're going to solve several different problems if you make this change. And I think that a difference in $200,000 or $150,000 or whatever that would be, with Loomis, if we're gonna use someone that we're already using, is a drop in the bucket of what needs to happen when we start talking about, again, the opportunity cost of having an officer actually be patrolling and having a presence in our parks.
Right, and then I've already mentioned it, but the last observation was just the revenue monitoring, making sure that, we recommended that process start back up where the operational management is getting revenue reports to assist in revenue monitoring, and they've already implemented that and started doing that again. So all in all, we had 4 high-risk recommendations, 3 medium-risk recommendations, and 3 low-risk, and they were all accepted.
I have a question. On Exhibit B, this revenue, this is not cash, this is total revenue.
That is, yeah, we tried to break it down, but
So this is a combination of
it's credit cards and cash, and we
That
couldn't.
was kind of my question. I was
Yeah.
like.
We thought about that during the
golly gee,
reporting.
that's a lot of
We
cash.
made inquiries to parks to try to break that down with the R12. They couldn't give us that information, so.
Couldn't give you the information.
So they don't.
She did, but not correct. There wasn't a way to break that
No,
revenue
our-
down into.
No, the response was R12 doesn't break it down by cash, credit card, or check. It would have to be a manual process with the bank and the treasury to pull deposit slips to get that information break.
So, question, why wouldn't R12 have some sort of, that seems like a systems issue, right?
Because, so when you get paid from a merchant service provider, credit card, it's entered as a cash transaction. And when you deposit cash, it's entered as a cash transaction. So there's really no way in the system to delineate the recording of a merchant deposit versus a cash deposit. Because they all hit the bank kind of in the same way.
Understood, but I guess, so Oracle is our R12 who does, right? But it would seem that, and I get why, in this way for reconciling everything, but it would seem for kind of a large organization trying to manage how many of our customers pay in cash or check or whatever, that would be useful information.
You can, in the description, enter in the description in R12, cash, credit card, those types of
So
things.
there's a description field that the Parks Department could utilize, but that would, what's the issue there?
I think that would be pretty cumbersome.
It'd slow me down getting to my tea time.
So it's just the
No, I
tedium
think
or
when
tedious.
I think when the deposit, when the deposit slip goes to the bank, and then when the bank gets the deposit, when First Horizon gets the deposit, they do a total. It's the total deposit. Like somebody may send in a check, it's broken down on the deposit slip by cash and check. And then the total, when they do the reconciliation, they're just saying we had a total of $2,000 sent to the bank today, and we make sure that $2,000 is in R12. It's not a line, we don't enter a line that says $50 cash and, the remainder check or something like that, because it's just a total deposit, a total daily deposit.
So it's really the way the bank receives it, less about anything else, possibly, yes.
But, I guess for whomever's driving around with the money that they picked up, right? Like
the
that's
police.
cash and check, so that's gonna be on a piece of paper
Well, they have
somewhere.
a sealed deposit bag. They don't actually have the cash. It's a deposit bag. It's a bag that's sealed and says this amount is received from Parks Admin or Two Rivers Golf or Ted Rhodes Golf. It's a total, and they just make a deposit dump. It's, they just take the full deposit to the bank, and they open each bag each day and make the, night or day.
And there's a deposit slip in it, and if that deposit slip doesn't match what's in it, that's when they call us and say, hey, come pick this up and reconcile it. And there were 5 of those that caused us to be here today.
But whoever's filling out the deposit slip, there's a section where it says cash and a section where it says checks.
They're not they do that.
Yes.
But they're not the people in the accounting office that does the daily.
They're keying it in.
Segregated.
So when you're keying it in, when you're keying it in into R12 and you're, debiting cash and crediting your revenue, in that debit, you can actually identify.
But that would
in
just
the
be a
description.
comment, right? You're just saying that's the comment.
You have to go back and manually.
But that way, we could see how much cash is actually coming in, because I know
Well, you would just have to read the comment. You still wouldn't be able to separate it out.
You'd run a report and then you'd have to sort it.
Yeah.
Like a separate
but that's
field.
easy enough to at least be able to answer the question. Because, you're talking about 15, 16, 17 million dollars
Yeah, and not all
a
of
year.
that is cash.
And not all of it is right, but it would be helpful to know.
Let me take this back. Let me take this
Yeah.
one and see if I
Okay.
can't get an answer on
Making
what's
the
cash, even though it was my own question. And see if I can't get an answer for you between what's cash and what's credit card, because I'm pretty sure that we
Credit
got
cards are
it.
not gonna be part of the deposit at the bank anyway.
That's right,
Right.
that's
No.
right, that's what
Right.
I'm saying. I'm
And I-
sure we can figure this out.
And this has been going predates R12. It's all financial systems. It's just not R12.
Understood, but I just think
Yeah,
from an operational management perspective of whether or not you're gonna pay for Loomis, whether or not, police officers, again, public, I don't want to say this is how much is in the money bag in the car of the what, I get why we're kind of, but I think, when and if and ever, right? As far as barriers to access and, allowing cash and the age of our user population versus tap and touch. And, we're having to kind of make decisions along the way. Certain organizations of okay, we're not doing cash anymore. And I think it would be worthwhile to understand at any particular golf site, whatever, how much based on this revenue is broken out in people, whatever, combined cash check, you don't have to split that, but, somebody's literally walking in there and putting down their, $10 to pay their really, really economical round of golf. I know it's not 10 anymore, but it's
More than that, but it's still very economical.
it's a great deal. Let me just
But
put
they
that
went
out.
up this year.
So I
They did go up this year.
They
I
went
will
up, but
say-
it only, Mr. Holmes, it's only around the golf 9 holes, the Percy Warner course is how much?
Depends on the day and how old you are.
I apologize, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I'm just trying to convey,
I have too many fees, I have all the fees in my
it's a
head.
really great deal.
It
all
is a
there,
very
yes.
good deal.
If you're over 90, I think you're free.
Yeah. On Wednesdays.
As you should be.
That's why I see all those old.
As far as recommendations, so I commented on General Funk's letter. I'm going to comment on this letter from Director Odom that says we've acknowledged and whatever. The recommendation, going back, and I know I'm harping on observation C with the police department or Parks Police, the recommendation is to review the current process. Well, I could say right now, check, we've reviewed it, moving on. That's not good enough for me. So
They put it in the budget. I'll answer I don't know if that's
to
what
put
they're
in
doing.
Brinks
Yes.
or Loomis.
It's a modification request in their budget this year.
All right.
Okay.
Man, that makes me happy.
Moving on.
Yeah.
I wanted to address that one, but I do want to go back to the cash. Because
Yeah.
for me, cash equals risk. When you're taking cash, there is so much risk associated with that. And and so I appreciate that you guys have really good written procedures and policies and that you're gonna address kind of the handling, with 2 people and all of that. So commend you on having good policies. Thank you so much for doing that. And, but there is risk associated with cash and a lot of people are cashless. So I'm not saying I'm doing that or anything like that. I'm just saying there is some.
That calculus changes
But-
over time, right?
right.
More and more people can just tap their phone and.
Tap their
We want
phone,
to respect all
that's
our
right.
folks that, that's not an option for them, but yeah. just
Well, and it's
interesting to
risky,
know.
and it's risky for the people when you have cash on hand, it's a risk for the people who are holding the cash too. It's a risk for the driver who's driving the cash. There's
that's kind of
risk
that cost
associated with all the cash. so.
Benefit analysis is, what percentage of your users actually pay cash? What percentage of your users don't have another option?
Got it.
And is the Loomis contract to carry around X dollars really worth it? Like, if we don't know.
All of that.
Okay,
And
got it.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for being here today.
For such a long time, thank you. Promptly arrived at 3:55.
Okay, the next item is, if you remember last year in April, we talked about my performance evaluation and just kind of an overview of it, because it will be done at the June meeting. If you remember, it is a 360 review, so I fill out a self-evaluation. Bill sends out an anonymous survey to our staff to get their evaluation. And if you also remember from April of last year, when Terry Costanis was still here, she mentioned that Metro Legal was accumulating the responses from the audit committee. However, that was just kind of as a courtesy and not really Metro Legal's realm. I spoke with Metro Legal and they're very busy. And so now we need to find a different way to accumulate the audit committee's responses whenever you all fill out the performance evaluation that we send out. So speaking with them, we were trying to figure out a way for this to be done, because we have always historically not done it within our office, since it puts somebody within our office in an awkward position.
Yep.
And so.
I say Tom does it.
I say mine. She was about to nominate you.
Me? I'll do it.
Vice Chair.
Lawrence.
Did you have a solution you
Yes,
would
wait,
propose?
so second motion's over here. Yeah.
Well, so their recommendation, I guess we talked about different ways, because there are limitations, there are concerns that we had about whether or not, because you all cannot deliberate an email, and making sure that we do all this process transparently. I think that the final recommendation was more along the lines of, we can set up a Survey Monkey under our account and send it out to you all. It would come to our office, but Bill has graciously volunteered to pull those results and send them to whoever you all would like to designate to then talk about it at the actual committee meeting, if that is agreeable.
Yeah.
I like that.
Or if there's
Thank you for
another,
the ability to do
or if
that.
there's another method that would like to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we want to, just, it's not necessarily bylaws or rules or whatever, but I think, sometimes default, not that it shouldn't be the vice chair, but I guess I would say Mike should be the chair, just by default, right? But
Back to you,
But I
Tom.
don't want to put the imposition on you, but I think just, from year to year, who wants it, whatever. I would say if we're gonna
Bringing the results.
create a process that doesn't go through legal, that assumes, but maybe we're gonna be iterative about it and we'll do it a different way next year and it doesn't
Or
really
you could
matter.
say chair or his or her designate.
Yeah.
And so if you really don't want to do it, you can designate somebody else.
Yeah,
That
but,
works.
Like
Do we need
Mr.
to,
Scanlon.
yeah, but what's incumbent on the
Continuously
chair
know what
or
calls
the
to
vice
avoid.
chair?
It is
in
just what has
aggregating?
always,
What's going on here?
what legal had done in the past was basically just bring the accumulated, average results to discuss at the meeting.
Which Survey Monkey will
Which
do.
would Survey Monkey would tally for us. Instead of, I've always felt sorry for Terry because she would do it manually. She would write out the numbers and do it with calculator. So that was, but Survey Monkey can do it and it would just be for whoever receives the results to then present them at the meeting.
Okay.
yeah, all right, we can do that. Do you need a motion or anything, or we
Nope.
just, okay,
You're good.
all right.
Okay, we'll go fast through our administrative items since it's been a while. So our first one is our audit, our project status, recommendation implementation. We had 31 recommendations that were due this time period with the March 30th, or the end of March date. There were a lot that were listed with that date. 27 of them were reported as implemented, 4 requested revised dates. 2 of them were criminal justice planning. They're working with JIS to get some of them implemented. They are working towards it, it's just taking a little bit of time. One of the recommendations was to JIS for their audit. It's redacted, so it's not in here, but they did say that they've figured out the solution for the recommendation. It's just now putting that into action, so that's their next step, and they had an April 30th completion date. The last one was related to the fire fleet audit. OFM was supposed to do a cost-benefit analysis. They have started that, but they want to make sure that they have sufficient information and all the inputs, and so they are still in the midst of doing that. And so they requested a little bit more time to get that wrapped up. So those are the 4 that were revised dates.
Question, since it's been at least 2 meetings since we talked about Metro Arts, are you going to report on those at the next?
Yes, so we have, the reason it has a May 1st date is because we are actually meeting with their interim, because there was turnover in their interim director. It kind of, we had some potential responses, but then it got lost in the shuffle, and so we actually have a meeting with her on Thursday to go through them so that she can tell us, one, what their action plans are, what's been implemented, what the actual dates are, so that we can, because like we said, when we actually issued that original report, we want to reissue the report with action plans and dates, and estimated dates, and so that would be at the next meeting.
Great.
Okay, our next thing is ongoing projects. We've got 8 projects going on. We've already issued 4 audits this year and 1 investigation report. We got 1 draft report. We actually have a few audits that are wrapping up field work and about to be in draft report. So we've got those going on. Let's see, after that, we have our budget. We're still well under budget. It's because some of our software costs, a big chunk of it is our software cost has not hit yet, as well as we've got travel coming up. 3 of us are going to a conference in Minneapolis in May for the Association of Local Government Auditors. More than we sent last year. We're trying to build up how many people go. That's our big training, as well as we've got some big training for Paul and some other, another investigation type training for that. So that's coming up. The big news is we are now fully staffed. Well, I say as of Monday because she starts on Monday. We got a fantastic pool of candidates for our Auditor 1 position that we posted. It's actually took us a while to go through all the interviews because we wanted to interview so many people. We wish we had more openings, but we made the difficult decision, and we have Courtney Grable Nelson, who will be starting with us on Monday. She's a recent Lipscomb grad with business management, and I think that's her degree, and then her minor in English, as well as she's getting her master's in sustainability. And so she will be starting with us on Monday. She's got a passion for public service, and so we are excited to have her on.
Cool, that's great. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. We are very excited. But if there's any questions? And that's all I have.
Is that it? I think from a budgetary perspective, fully staffed and so forth, but any asks or adjustments, you're under budget, you said, anything that you anticipate for the budget season you want us to be aware of? Or?
As mentioned at the last one, we have requested one new position with Paul's work. We are hoping to build those investigations. We want somebody to work with Paul, to work on that. So that's
Paul's gonna farkle out.
We don't want to run him off really quickly. So that's our biggest ask. We have a few other small asks with training. Like I said, we want to send more people to the in-person training. They can go virtually, but it's just not the same connections and networking. So we've asked for that. We've asked for some more software because we have to have software to support new hires. I'm trying to think of the other one. We asked for printing because with the work that Paul's doing, we want to get our name out more. So we want to have something that we can give to people that they will actually have that is physical for them to remember what they should do and their duty to report.
Yep, that's great.
So those are the biggest things. And we're asking for our budgetary savings back.
Thank you.
Good reports today. Any considerations we need to mention for future meetings?
I will give you all a heads up, we are somewhat changing the report format. We did not win a Knighton Award this year with the Association of Local Government Auditors. Some of the feedback usually is that our reports are not the prettiest. That's one of the aspects of it. So we're changing things up a little bit. So when we issue our next follow-up is the first one that you'll see. We're gonna have a slightly different report format.
We'll look forward to that.
Great work.
Then
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
with that, we will adjourn the public meeting.
Go into executive session?